Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us in the weekly roundup by the Startup Operator. I'm Gunjan Saha, your host, and alongside I have with me Roshan Cariappa. We have loads to talk about in this 34th episode of the series. And for those who are joining us for the first time, the weekly roundup is a live discussion on the week's biggest headlines from the Indian startup ecosystem. We talk about fundraisers, we talk about major mergers and acquisitions trends, and of course, how they're shaping, one of the fastest growing startup hubs in the world. So don't forget to hit the follow button so that you can join the discussion with us every Sunday. And yeah, Roshan, so how was the week for you?
Week has been long and tiring, I should say, right? Which is why we're doing the roundup at 9 p.m. in the night, right? I mean, very interesting week also. And as expected, I didn't get the Zomato allotment, right? So yeah, but I applied anyway, right? So yeah, interesting week for sure.
Well, even though, I mean, after the markets opened to the closing bell, there was a 65% jump.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Okay, so we have loads to talk about from the previous week, so we'll just directly dive into it. But I think the biggest news was Swiggy's fundraise from SoftBank. They raised $1.25 billion from SoftBank's Vision Fund 2 and existing investors process, who we formerly called NASPERS. Axel and Wellington Management took part in the fundraise. Today's after this fundraise, Swiggy is now valued approximately at $5.5 billion, and I think majority of this fund will be used to go to grow beyond their core food delivery business and build other revenue models like Zomato. I mean, after the Zomato IPO news, I started, reading more about it and discovered it's not only the restaurant business or the food delivery model which they have, but they're also into, ads, they're also into grocery sourcing, and of course, there's Zomato Pro. And like that, Swiggy has also diversified its bets. They have the pickup and drop service, Swiggy Genie, and recently they also entered into the e-grocery delivery segment with Instamart, right? So, what do you make of this? With Zomato, the listing which we had last week.
Yeah, it's I guess a last call in for investors before IPO or lead up to the IPO kicks off, right? And we saw what the Zomato listing was like. It was a bumper listing. The price was at 76, and they ended the day at I think 125. Subscribed about 40 times. Interestingly, on that note, Uber's stake is now worth about 1.2 billion, right? They have a 9% stake in Zomato
Little-
through the Uber Eats acquisition. So that was pretty interesting, I thought. And this market is a duopoly, right? I mean, with Uber Eats gone and plenty of others that came before, like Tiny Owl and so on. It's basically a duopoly, and depending on what the report or what or who you listen to, the market is split about, I think, Zomato around 38%, Swiggy around 27%, or vice versa, right? I mean, depending on who you read. And when we covered Zomato's IPO last week, we said that there's a lot of headroom for growth, right? And food delivery itself, as a percentage of food consumption in India, is very low, right? And we mentioned this before, that it's a permanent change, right? Post pandemic, that all of us are locked up inside. uh, the demand aggregation, in my opinion, will happen on the cloud, right? For most of the restaurants around. I mean, you probably can ignore all of the fine dining restaurants or people who really invest in experiences and so on. But for the rest of the restaurant businesses, I think it will happen on the cloud, right? And this is great for restaurants as well, because I mean they have a wider market to play at, right? And good for consumers as well. They have a lot more options. Uh, you know, we're seeing interesting times for sure, right? Swiggy, I think they're targeting about 500 million users. Also, I think that was their last stated mission, right? And it's one of those businesses that's also we made the same point about Zomato as well, right? That the execution has been amazing, and Swiggy equally has been so focused, right? I mean, they started off in they didn't start off in like 14 or 15 cities. They were very limited, and I think even up until Series A or Series B time, they probably were at 6 or 8 cities, right? And they really executed very well. owned the market in these cities and then decided to like expand further, right? And if you look at it, I think the food delivery business itself, right, is the most difficult use case for the last mile delivery, right? And make no bones about it. I think actually, I think they make no bones about it that this is the sort of business they're in. They're in the last mile delivery business, right? So today they're giving you fresh food, right? Tomorrow they will give you groceries. The day after, I mean, they may deliver some pharmacy, some medicines and whatnot, right? I mean, that's very well the case, right? Uh, the unit economics, I mean, if you look at it fundamentally, I think they charge about 25% on as commissions to the restaurant, and then they have a delivery fee over and above that. But the numbers look pretty crazy, right? I mean, I think the previous year they made a 3,900 crore loss, right? Upwards of $500 million. If you just compare this, I think Zomato is around 800 crores of loss, right? And Zomato, again, I mean, it's come down from about 2,300 crores that they lost the previous year. And if you look at a company like Flipkart, for example, they're at about 1,950 crores loss, right? So by no means I'm saying that it will be a smooth ride from here on. I think the execution has to be perfect, not even near perfect, right? I mean, at the valuation that they're playing at and at the scale that they're playing at. And it'll be interesting to see how all of these non-food sort of businesses with Swiggy kick in, right? Whether Instamart that you mentioned and so on, right? So the one thing that Swiggy does have going for it is the fact that there are a lot of repeat orders. It's a sort of a habit and a lifestyle at this point of time, right? So people are pretty regular in that sense, and so they're really playing at the whole LTV of CAC to LTV sort of a thing there, right? So yeah, I mean, will definitely be interesting times for sure.
I mean, yeah, like after Uber started, like it became a common term, right? I mean, to go from point A to point B, we can just Uber it. The name of the company became a verb. That's how even many people nowadays, let's just Swiggy food. There's no one just say let's order food anymore.
Yeah.
So, Swiggy was sorry, Zomato was the first startup to have debuted in the IPO, right? And apart from Zomato, four other companies have already announced that they'll be taking the IPO route. That is Paytm and MobiKwik. Policybazaar will be the fifth company to have announced its IPO role. Recently, over the week, they announced they're planning to raise close to $870 million. That's roughly 6,500 CR through an IPO. Right, the parent company has also passed a special resolution to rename itself to PB Fintech Limited as part of converting itself to a public entity from a private one. Now, Policybazaar is of course one of India's largest insurance marketplaces. In its last funding round, they had raised $75 million at a valuation of 2.4 billion. They reported a loss of rupees 218 crore in the financial year 2019-20 against a loss of 213 crore in the previous fiscal. But it's very interesting to note that Policybazaar owns a 90% market share in the online insurance space. And I think they're coming up with a lot of offline retail stores as well. But, Policybazaar is another company that has been around for a while, right? So, what do you make of their IPO plans?
It's fantastic, right? I mean, and similar to Swiggy, this one is another SoftBank backed company as well. And like Zomato, it was Zomato's peer, right? I mean, founded in 2008, and I think they've probably published a draft of the red herring prospectus required for the IPO. See, we've made the point about insurance plenty of times on the podcast before, right? That insurance is sold, not bought, and this huge amount of information asymmetry, a lot of people-intensive processes, and so on. I think we had Abhishek and Saurabh of Plum on the podcast not too long ago, and they we did a deep dive on the insurtech as such, right? uh, Policybazaar, interestingly, almost shut down in 2014, right? And it was a pretty interesting turn of events because IRDA, which is the regulatory authority, suddenly passed a rule on aggregators, right? And they said something like so the basic fundamental policy of, I mean, fundamental business model of Policybazaar was that they would act as an aggregator, a marketplace, and sort of give these leads to insurance companies, right? And IRDA in 2014 passed a rule that you cannot charge more than $10 per lead, right? And
Right.
and that insurance companies can only offer, or perhaps offer, less than 25% of what they offer to an agent, right? So something like 90% of their revenues were hit, right, almost instantly. And I think there was a lot of pressure on them to kind of shut down the business and everything. And since then, I mean, they've really come back through hard knuckles execution. They've diversified into Bazaar after that, right? Just give me a second.
So I think I made a mistake while calling our Policybazaar's market share. I think they have owned close to 60% of the online retail insurance retail space, which accounts for 10% of the entire insurance market in India. The offline market place for insurance is around 90%. But how
Yeah.
Roshan, you were saying?
Yeah, sorry about that. So they diversified into Bazaar, which was again aggregation for loans and credit cards and so on, right? And they hedged their risks. They hedged their risk further by getting into Doc Prime, which is medical care, and then the quick fix cards, which is on the servicing side. And these are things that you can do when you have an aggregate of demand, right? I mean, they have something like 100 million plus visitors on the Policybazaar website itself, and interestingly, to the story comes full circle, right now they're seeing a lot of tailwinds in the regulatory side of things. I mean, so I think 2019 the government announced 100% FDI in insurance intermediaries, right? So which is, again, it works in their favor. And yeah, I mean, solid business, 1,000 plus crores in revenue, uh, uh, growing rapidly, right? And sort of functioning as a conglomerate in that sense, right? Like a fintech, insurtech conglomerate of sorts. Really, yeah, fantastic business.
Yep. So, we have been missing one thing in our weekly roundups nowadays. That is Byjus. So Byjus is back in the news and again, making large headlines. They recently acquired Topper and Great Learning. And I think the total number of acquisitions made by Byjus in just 2021 has gone up to seven. And the seventh startup was US based and it's called Epic. Epic is a digital reading platform for children aged 12, and the acquisition was, valued at $500 million. Now, interestingly, this Epic's acquisition will expand Byju's footprint by providing access to more than 2 million teachers and 50 million children who are part of Epic's existing global user base. And this has doubled over the last year. The acquisition is also part of Byju's overseas expansion plans, and the company is expecting to generate a revenue of $300 million this financial year. But I mean, if you look at all of the seven acquisitions, right, I think the total bill is steadily going closer to $2 billion, right? $2 billion worth of acquisitions. I mean, that must be big, right, for a startup.
Yeah, my favorite joke about the acquisitions, and there were many such jokes on Twitter, but I think my favorite was my friend Devaya PV, right? He tweeted, "I know of 4 students in class 11 who got on a Zoom call to discuss electromagnetism, and by the end of the call, even they got acquired by Byjus." Right? Yeah, I mean, see, I think Byjus is, single-handedly making the case for why edtech is going to be a multi-decacorn business, right? Obviously, we had mentioned earlier that they'll raise more, and picture abhi baki hai. There's a huge amount of consolidation, right? And they are trying to corner the supply, basically, right? And education in India is over, again, depending on what report you read, right? $180 billion market, and online education as such is, little over 1%. And that is growing at a CAGR of 20%, right? So you have the typical characteristic of huge headroom for growth and like a phenomenal growth rate, right? So which is kind of like I mean, it's like any investor's wet dream, right? So it's a perfect combination in that sense, right? Huge market to play with and rapid growth. So yeah, and of course, I mean, India is not short of people. We have 500 million people who in the education, in the class of people who can be educated, right? 5 to 24 years of age, and made the point before that I think we will skip a lot of these institutions and we'll directly jump into some sort of ed tech sort of a mode, right? I mean, do I believe that another 30 IITs will be built in India? Maybe yes, but then I mean, I think it's more likely that these kind of online platforms will serve the need beyond any physical colleges can, right? And one thing also is, like, I think the grab, the kind of market valuations that people are seeing right now, and plus the grab 40 billion SPAC and so on, has given people the confidence to go out and like sort of do these things, right? That Byjus is doing. So yeah, I mean, I'm really dumbfounded by, I mean, really, really surprised and really not surprised. I mean, I'm gobsmacked, I should say, right, by the amount of scale that we're seeing, right? Whether it's Swiggy, whether it's Zomato, whether it's Byjus, or even Policybazaar. So yeah, it's crazy.
So another interesting fact about Byju's, right? I mean, in one of our roundups, we had also covered, Byju's acquiring White Hat Junior, which is a US-based company, and again, Epic. And a couple of months back, we covered the largest acquisition worth $1 billion. That was Akash. So, I mean, they are targeting a fully global market right now, I'd say.
Yeah, they are. I mean, that's why I said it's a multi-decacorn business, right? See, we we often get blinded by India's large domestic consumption and large domestic market itself, right? So India is a nation of 1.4 billion people, right? Any market arguably serving India itself will be huge, right? But then, I mean, edtech is one of those use cases that can very well translate outside, right? I mean, if a guy in Chennai can teach someone in Bangalore, they can teach someone in Europe as well, right? I mean, why can't they do that? And India is especially good at STEM, for example, right? So all of these things, I mean, we're just seeing the beginning of that revolution, right? And things will look very, very, very different 5 years from now, even 5 years from now, I'd say.
Yeah. So, again, another IPO, en route to the IPO route, right? We have delivery. Most recently, FedEx Express, which is a subsidiary of FedEx Corp, has invested $100 million in homegrown logistics and supply chain startup delivery. The logistics startup, they're planning an IPO in early 2022. And as part of this deal, FedEx Express and Delivery will enter into a long-term commercial agreement in which FedEx will focus on international export and import services to and from India. And Delivery will, in addition to FedEx sell FedEx Express international products and services in the India market. They'll provide pickup and delivery services across India. FedEx will also transfer certain assets pertaining to its domestic business in India to Delivery. I mean, this is interesting, right? Two logistic giants now getting into a partnership with a startup, that is inbound the IPO route in 2022.
Yeah. And three of the four startups that actually, even Byjus, right? Byjus also says that in another 18 or 24 months, they will also go the IPO route and hopefully in India, list in India itself, right? And Delivery as well is an IPO candidate. I wonder how how the markets will look like, I mean, in the future with these kind of companies entering it. Perhaps, I mean, SEBI can consider an alternate listings, alternate exchange for these kind of companies. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty interesting. Huge vote of confidence, I would say, for Delivery's execution, because FedEx is the gold standard in logistics, right? And it's the case of a 50-year-old business validating the 10-year-old startup. So roughly what I understand is Delivery will be FedEx India and FedEx will be Delivery Global, essentially, right? And they
Yeah.
will sort of share their assets and expertise and everything. Do you know about Fred Smith's story? I mean, anytime, I mean, I talk about FedEx, I just have to talk about the story. Have you heard about Fred Smith and what he did?
No, but let's hear about it.
So in the early days, they were facing a cash crunch, right? I mean, they had, I think they'd applied for a business loan or something and it was denied. So Fred Smith, who's the founder of FedEx, he took about $5,000 went to Vegas, gambled, and won $27,000, right? Playing blackjack to cover the company's expense of $24,000 for the fuel bill.
Okay, let's add a disclaimer here, folks. Before gambling, it's at your own risk.
It's crazy, right? And that apparently kept FedEx alive for one more week that was required to, get the money needed and so on, right? So again, pretty legendary company, legendary founder as well. Yeah, see, delivery, I think if we've spoken about plenty of times before, right? Billion plus orders, work with almost all of the e-commerce players. In fact, a lot of other smaller businesses as well, right? And they're building this whole plug and play framework where basically any person can sort of open a storefront and have the backend required to run physical operations completely set up, right? And
Yeah.
that again is such a huge sort of enabling mechanism for innovation, really, right? And as with the previous companies that we discussed, delivery is playing in a $200 billion addressable market, right? So yeah, I mean, again, very nice.
So just like Byju's, how we can't have a roundup without a Byju's acquisition. We cannot even have a roundup nowadays without adding a new unicorn to the list, right? Blackbuck recently announced that they have raised $67 million from Tribe Capital, VEF, and IFC Emerging Asia Fund to become 2021's 16th unicorn. Blackbuck runs an online marketplace for trucking, digitizes fleet operations, and matches trucks with relevant loads. Somewhat like an Uber for trucks. And a funny story I'll tell you: Blackbuck, in its first few days, they ended up giving away 100 free smartphones to truck drivers. To so that they start using the platform. And out of the 100, only five cell phones or truckers were active by the end of the first trip, right? But not turning back from there, Blackbuck now has over 7 lakh truckers, 1.2 million trucks, and they claim to command a 90% plus market share in the online trucking. Its client list includes SMEs and even large corporates like HUL, Reliance, Coca-Cola, Tata, and L&T. So we are seeing delivery digitize the whole logistics space, right? For e-commerce, we have Blackbuck, which essentially providing an Uber for trucks. What do you
Yeah.
think of this?
No, a lot more than Uber for trucks, right? See, any of these businesses, whether you take Policybazaar or whether you take, those e-commerce companies or food delivery companies or Blackbuck itself, I mean, obviously they start with the whole marketplace and demand aggregation sort of a mode, right? But I mean, they end up being a lot more relevant to both the supply side and the demand side of things, right? So Blackbuck has gone way beyond just simply being a marketplace, right? So as you rightly mentioned, Uber for trucks, they connect freight operators and trucks, right? I mean, truckers rather. So trucking in India is the backbone of logistics, right? I mean, 65% of freight is through trucks, right? And some reports say there are 20 lakh truck drivers in India. And see, this is a market that has huge inefficiencies, right? Like huge inefficiencies, very, very poor work conditions also. And again, I mean, this is one of those markets that's ripe for disruption through technology, right? So what has happened in the last 2-3 years, especially with the geo revolution and FASTag that the government has made necessary, right? And apparently, I mean, Blackbuck is like doing really well on that front, right? And some of the states have mandated GPS, for instance, right? All of these are like increasing digital adoption, which makes the impact of some of the stuff that some of the stuff that Blackbuck does all that more interesting and impactful, right? So yeah, and what I read was around 95% of bookings are for small fleet owners. Like these are people who own 2-3 trucks types, right? And their lives have been completely transformed. um, so I mean, hard infrastructure in India itself is such a low hanging fruit for us, right? I mean, just simply connecting the country will have huge dividends in terms of business and economy, right? So uh, I, in that sense, I mean, we're we're due for an Eisenhower moment for India, right? Eisenhower is famously the US president who built all of the, or at least, I mean, enabled all of the interstate highways, right? And that has made such a huge difference for the US, right? So, and I'm positive that we're getting there, because this government for sure spends a lot of money on infrastructure, right? Even despite the pandemic, last year we had something like 37 kilometers of roads built per day, so which is again phenomenal, right? So yeah, again, a lot of headroom to play, a lot of fundamental changes happening, and lot of efficiencies due to technology innovation. So yeah, kind of the perfect business, I would say.
So earlier we have been talking a lot about B2C startups, but it's good. It's really encouraging to see a lot of B2B startups also becoming unicorns this year. But even apart from this, there were quite a lot of other, fundraisers that took place last week. Lenskart, which is the omni-channel D2C eyewear brand, announced that they had raised $220 million, which was led by Temasek and Falcon Edge Capital. Another D2C brand called Bella Vita Organic, they had raised $10 million from Ananta Capital to scale operations. Spinny, which is the used car retail platform startup, and also something which I had covered earlier, they had raised $108 million in a Series D round that was led by Tiger Global, Avenir Growth, and others. Healthify Me, which is an AI-driven health and fitness app startup, they raised $75 million in a Series C round, and this was led by Leapfrog and Khosla Ventures. Another health tech, Dozy, that provides remote health monitoring solutions and devices that track heart health, respiration, sleep quality, and stress levels. They raised $6 million in Series A, and it was led by Prime Venture Partners. Multi-channel sales engagement platform Outplay has completed a Series A fundraising round of $7.3 million, and this was raised by Secure Capital India. So a lot of interesting, we see spaces
Yeah.
emerging. D2C brands are, coming to the limelight. Even health tech, we saw a lot of health tech funding as well. And I
Yeah,
think that's good for you.
yeah, more than a few, and I wish I had the time to delve into Healthify Me. Right, Healthify Me is again a phenomenal business, and this whole consumer SaaS phenomena, right? I mean, is really going to is another thing that we should really keep an eye out for, and perhaps one of the episodes we should definitely do a deep dive on a few of these companies, right? And it'll happen, I think, if you look at Ultra Human, for example, or even CureFit, right? I mean, typically these are again recurring revenue on the consumer side. Very interesting business. I think uh, Healthify Me was at something like 25 million users or 10 million users. I'm not very sure, right? Uh, very interesting business, and definitely something to look out for sure.
Talk about interest. There's one more company which I missed called Zook. Right now, Zook is a vegan lifestyle brand, and they raised $1.5 million in pre-Series A funding, and which is led by Stellaris Venture Partners. Now, Zook, they use vegan leathers to make, accessories like vegan leather bags and wallets. So, really interesting times ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, who'd have thought, right? That vegan leather bags will have a market in India. I mean, amazing.
It might just become a new trend to carry a vegan bag around. But so I think this was the most iconic tweet from the week, right? Zomato's official Twitter handle had posted a picture, and the caption was from one day to day one, right?
Yeah.
So, and considering the sort of news which are covering in the roundups, many startups can, scale from that one day to day one feeling.
Yeah, it's, I mean, no doubt an iconic moment, right? Last week, again, I mean, we've said plenty of things about it, but you can't really say enough, right? I mean, it's just been built on such phenomenal execution, and really, I mean, I would love for Zomato to go out and become that sort of generational company, right? I mean, it'll be really interesting to see how things pan out over the next 10 years, but I'm definitely rooting for them.
Yep. So that was the news which we had to cover this week. But before we sign off for the day, Roshan, what episodes are we putting out in the coming week?
A couple of very very interesting episodes coming up. I had a great chat with Suresh Shankar, who is the founder and CEO of Crayon Data, and they help large enterprises basically drive personalization at scale, right? I mean, so think of a Netflix like experience, right? So how can any large enterprise adopt these? And they work with banks and retailers and so on. And Suresh himself is a serial entrepreneur, second time founder, has had a successful exit earlier, sold his business to IBM some time back, and has been in the data analytics space for a good amount of time, 10, 15 years now, right? So I had a great chat about being a second time founder, and also uh, what data and AI can do for companies, right? So excellent conversation. Do check it out. And also, I mean, I spoke to uh, you know an amazing person, Deepak Abbott, right? I mean, I've spoken to Deepak before on a podcast, but this time, I mean, we delved upon his journey itself. And Deepak is perhaps one of the best known product talents in India, right? I mean, he's such a you can think about it. I mean, I think he was head of growth at Paytm, right, and then headed product there as well. And he has seen scale from 0 to 1 to 10 to a few 100 million plus users, right, at all of these different places. And he has started an interesting business called India Gold at this point of time, right? Very interesting conversation, plenty of aspects on product, on growth, and building a business, right? So both of these are amazing episodes. Do check them out, and yeah, would love to hear from you on what you liked about it, what we can do to improve, and so on.
Right. And the way you can reach out to us is via social media handles, which is at Operator Startup on Twitter and the Startup Operator on LinkedIn. Apart from that, we also recently launched our podcast on Amazon Music. You can get them through your Prime subscription or from the directly from the music app. And yeah, and if this was the first roundup that you're part of, don't forget to hit the subscribe button or follow the podcast in your favorite podcast platform. And yeah, I think we had a great chat, Roshan. Thank you so much. I think we'll have more interesting news again next week.